History is full of rich connections to God and the great outdoors He created for us. I'm on a mission to fellowship with other fathers as we introduce our sons and daughters to the beauty and bounty of the world where we are blessed to walk with our Heavenly Father in His garden. My name is Jacob Whitley, and this is Fathers and the Great Outdoors.
That one, if you're sitting there saying, well, that one wasn't a monster. Well, what about this one?
Welcome back to Fathers in the Great Outdoors. If you want to continue to support this program, you can check out our website at greatoutdoorspodcast.com, where we have a lot of fun merch and some other gear on there as well. Today we have Greg Staggs. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on.
Well, you bet. My pleasure.
So I usually like to get started just by kind of going into your background, how you got started in the great outdoors.
Yeah, so I grew up in a little part of Missouri called the Boot Hill. And if you're not familiar with the Midwest and the central region there, where Missouri's more or less a square, and there's a little part in the bottom right corner that sticks down into Arkansas. And if you kind of look at it, it looks like a boot hill. And so that's what it's called. And so back when I grew up in kind of the late, mid to late 70s, early 80s was time that my father introduced me to the outdoors. And we always had a couple of beagles, and there were a lot of ditch dumps and railroad tracks and just, it kind of littered the area, separated those ditch dumps and railroad tracks and fence rows, separated a lot of the cotton fields and soybean fields that we grew up with. And we just walked those for miles and miles and miles, chasing behind beagles and listening to them, chase a rabbit. And we did a lot of frogging as well. A lot of those drainage ditches that were cut to expedite drainage, where they drained the swampland to turn it into farmland, made for really great frogging ditches. And so those were the two primary methods or means that my dad introduced me to the outdoors and got me hooked. I've just, can't get enough of being outdoors and surrounding and immersing myself into the great outdoors since I was 6-7 years old.
What's the process for frogging like?
So frogging is really cool. So frogs sit out on the bank of a ditch, or some people would call them like a small river or a creek. We call them ditches because they were man-made. They were typically excavated out, and they're pretty much a straight line for miles and miles and miles. And frogs will sit out on the sides of the bank, and we would take a 10-foot John boat, and I was the locomotion. I sat in the back, Dad would sit in the front, and we would have a battery, and he would have a million-power Q-beam handheld spotlight. And I was paddling the boat from the back, and we would just go right down the middle of the ditch, and Dad would be casting the light on the banks, looking for the frogs sitting on the side. And then we had probably about a 12-foot long gig pole. It looked like a little mini fish spear, but it was a frog gig. And once he spotted it, I'd be paddling down. And once he spotted it, he would hand the light to me. I would hold the light on the frog. The light itself will almost, put a frog into a trance, almost like a deer in headlights. And it will hold it there. And we would glide up to it. And then he would gig it while I held the light. And there were some other ditches that we went down to that they were shallow enough that they started growing up what we called a moss. It truly wasn't a moss. It was more like a hydrilla, something like that literally would form a carpet from bank to bank. And those were problematic when we first started encountering those, because the frogs would just sit literally right in the middle of, again, what we call the moss, would sit right in that, and they would just kind of splay out in the middle of the water. And there was nothing behind them for the gig to push against. So we lost a lot of frogs trying to gig a frog that was just kind of floating on that moss, until we finally figured out that we just bought an old 22, like a Marlin 22, like from a pawn shop. It was battered and beaten, and it was laid in the bottom of the John boat, get water all over it, and I'd have to oil it every night when we got home. But we would float up 2 or 3 foot away from the frog, and I would punch it right in the eardrum with a 22 short or 22 hollow point. And the frog, sometimes it would splat out right there, but a lot of times it would sink. But those ditches were 3 or 4 foot deep, and we could just go over there and feel around and I eventually find the frog. And once we figure out how to shoot them like that in the water, which is a legal technique, you can either frog with a hunting license or a fishing license. And if you're going to shoot, though, you have to have a hunting license to frog if you're going to shoot the frogs. And we started, I mean, we would limit out every time from that. But that was a ton of fun growing up, was going after the frogs. And I still love going out and gigging a few frogs with my boys today.
Yeah. You use the same techniques today?
Yeah, we don't shoot them as much because we'll walk some little ponds on some friends' farms and stuff like that, and we'll just use a flashlight and a gig and get them that way. But one of these days, I'd like to go back to the area. I live about probably 2.5 hours north of where I grew up in the Boot Hill. I live closer up to the St. Louis area now, and I would love though to take them back to some of the ditches that I frogged with my father. That's kind of been a goal of mine that it's kind of escaped me now. My oldest is 21, my youngest is 17. If I'm going to do it, I need to hurry up and do it. I'd love to take them back one night and just, because we would go for miles. There were times that, there was a few nights that the sun was coming up as we were loading the boat back up, and we'd stayed out all night gigging. So, yeah, that was kind of how I was introduced.
Yeah. What kind of dishes can you do with frogs?
What kind of what can we do?
Dishes for cooking.
Typically we just prepared them one way. We would gut them, skin them. We got to where I can clean a frog in probably 30, 40 seconds, maybe a minute and a half tops. And we just kind of prepare them like we would rabbit. We, kind of soak them in a milk, real quick. And, salt and pepper them, roll them in flour and deep fry them. And so, we pretty much fried all of our frog legs. There's probably other things you can do with them, but we just always fried our frog legs.
Yeah. What?
And there's a lot of people who some people have tried frog legs off of a buffet, like at a Chinese restaurant or, a fish house or something like that. I'm telling you, it's almost like eating the difference between eating wild turkey and tame turkey. There's a tremendous difference in a wild frog leg and these, the frog legs that you find on a buffet. There's no comparison.
Is that because of what they're eating?
I believe so. I think those things, the things they serve off buffets, I mean, they're okay. And I eat them when I go to a Chinese buffet or at a fish wharf or, a fish buffet, I'll eat them, but they just don't have the good flavor. And again, I think it's probably because of the wild, it's just like a wild turkey is different than a tame bred turkey. They're probably eating a lot more, bugs and, I mean, frogs they're a voracious predator. I mean, they'll eat. I mean, we used to have a lot of fun too. Dad would spot one, and we'd be fishing off of a bridge or something growing up, and we would, lower a little bitty fly or something, or a little bitty bass plug to it, and I mean, they just gobbled up, and then you just reel them up. We'd catch them that way too. Yeah. So they're voracious predators. So, but I'm sure the ones that are farm raised are probably not getting all that.
Not as much action.
Yeah.
It's all about the life they live.
Yeah.
So as far as the dogs go, was there ever a variety of what they were used for to go after?
We only used them for rabbit hunting, and we didn't. So where I grew up, deer were not prevalent, and we didn't have any deer. So that the Boot Hill, I mean, we had rabbit, squirrels, quail, pheasants, a little bit of pheasants, but not many. I mean, literally, I think I count on one hand the number of pheasants that jumped up while we were rabbit hunting, and mostly that was it. It was small game, and so we never had to worry about our beagles getting on a deer track and running a deer for miles and miles and miles. Just there were no deer around. Nowadays, I've got some friends that I've kept up with through Facebook that I graduated high school with and stuff, and some of those very same ditches that we rabbit hunted are now homes to some really, really nice deer. Some 140, 150 class deer that just amaze me that those kind of deer have moved into that area and have thrived down there. So, but we just use them solely for rabbit hunting.
Have your boys had, or sorry, I said boys, but is that what you have?
Boys? I have two boys, a 17 and a 21-year-old.
Have they had experiences hunting with dogs?
Not with dogs. Because where we live at now, I mentioned I moved up north a couple hours away. And so once I got up here, and of course I relocated here after I got married. And actually I came here to graduate school and got my master's here. and then got married shortly after. And so ever since that I've had my boys, we really kind of got into other things. We do a lot of deer hunting. My youngest now is really big into duck hunting, things like that. So we stayed hunting hard. I mean, they've been in the outdoors with me ever since they could toddle along, kind of dragging a stuffed animal along with me by my side. But we've chosen to pursue other things. So I do have a buddy of mine that lives sort of halfway back through there that I know him from the fishing world, and he raises beagles and has them. And he told me that anytime I want to take the boys, I can bring them down there and we'll spend an afternoon, behind a pack of beagles. But yeah, we've chosen mostly to spend most of our time deer hunting, trapping, and then fishing. I bought a big catfish boat, a 26-foot catfish boat. I live about 9 miles from the Mississippi, and we spend a lot of time on the Mississippi with a catfish boat too in the summer.
Yeah. What are those experiences been like for the catfishing?
It was interesting because it's been a blast, but it was a very good teaching moment. I actually wrote a big feature article for this for a magazine called Catfish Now. And because by the time we had 7 years we had 5.5 years of infertility challenges, and there's a tremendous testimony in how we had our boys that someday if we want to get into it, I can tell that it's an incredible testimony. But because we had 5.5 years of infertility challenges, by the time, and then my wife and I got married later in life anyway, by the time we had our boys, we were older. I'd been hunting for quite a while, and I'm not saying I had the deer hunting thing completely figured out, but I experienced some really good success. And by the time I got my boys into hunting, deer hunting, I had a wall full of big bucks, and I've become pretty well known in the mobile hunting community for being a pretty good bow hunter especially on public land and being able to get the job done there. And so my boys never got to see that learning curve. They never got to see me struggle to pick up something new. It just, if dad was going to go out hunting, I was bringing home, 5, 6, 7, 8 deer a year to feed the family and everything. They always knew me as an accomplished deer hunter. And so it was just a few years back that I went and bought the catfish boat. And it was really key to me to get the boys on the boat and let them see me learn something from ground zero. They got to see a struggle. I mean, we went a whole summer without catching a fish. And I mean, because we chase big, huge trophy catfish, so my personal best right now is 65. My youngest son's is 64. So we go after some really world-class fish. If we wanted to go out and catch, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 pounders, that'd probably been not a big deal. But we were trying to learn how to compete in tournaments, how to go after the world-class fish, and they got to see that from the ground up. So it was a major thing to say that for them to see me have to learn, and that was pretty cool. That was really cool.
Yeah. What was it specifically that you did learn that helped you and your boys advance with catches like that?
There's a lot to it. We jumped on the boat with a bunch of people. I asked a million questions of the tournament cat. We enter tournaments left and right, and I think that's a great thing. I think one of the biggest takeaways is we started tournament catfishing with some of the best catfishermen in the world, river catfishermen in the Midwest, fishing the Mississippi and Tennessee rivers and things like that. And we would go out there and just not get a bite. And we would come back and we would think all day like that fishing was poor that day. The fish weren't biting. It was just a bad day. And we'd come back to the tournament and we were weighing 3 fish limits, and people were weighing in 140 pounds of fish with 3 fish. And it was like the top 5, 6, 7, 8 places were over 100 pounds, and we hadn't got a bite. I'm like, okay, we've got a lot to learn. And so one of the big things was learning was that the fish are biting somewhere. There's a pattern we just hadn't figured out. And so it's not that the fish it's just a bad day or that the fish weren't biting or they're biting somewhere. People are catching fish. People are always going to catch fish somewhere. And so we learn to adjust and maybe tweak things to slow down the presentation, speed it up, change bait, whatever it may be. So, that there's a reason we're not catching right now. We just got figured out. That was a big part of the learning process.
Yeah. Do you find that it's about kind of reading things and moving, or is there a big patience involved with kind of holding still?
So it's funny. We one of our big mentors in the catfishing world, he's got a fond saying, and it's kind of prevalent. He's got a fond saying of "Don't leave fish to go find fish." But at the same time, it's kind of a 50-50 thought process in the catfishing world. If you've marked fish with your sonar, with your graph, right? If you've
Hmm.
marked fish and you think they're there, it do you stay on those fish and just stay with them, stay with them, stay with them, stay with them in that stretch of the river, or there's just as equally uh, you know a good a theory that says, you know what, if those fish aren't eating, if those fish aren't hungry, or if those fish are too small, leave. Go find new fish. And so I don't know. We've done both. We spent all the last tournament we were fishing the Cabela's King Cat tournament, and I caught a 63 right off the bat. I mean, within the first 20 minutes, we thought it was going to be a good day because that tournament allowed two overs over 35 inches and one under, and so we had one of our overs right off the bat within the first 30 minutes. We had all day to catch one more, and we were fairly confident you'd get an under, which sometimes does prove problematic. But we stayed on that stretch of river, and we were marking fish, we were catching fish, we just never could get another good one. And then we finally, the last hour of the tournament, we left and we started getting into more fish again. But it's like, you always second guess yourself. Should
Yeah.
we have left earlier? Should we have stayed? I don't know. You just never know.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a bit of a science behind it too, which I could say that I've never figured it out. A good day fishing for me is catching something small and leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's I guess I was curious to hear if catfish responded differently than if you were going after like bass or something like that.
There's a lot of similarities in the fact that catfish relate to structure, just like largemouth bass or smallmouth, just like any bass does. They relate to a lot of structure. They'll lie in wait behind current rifts and seams. Current seams. We're looking for current seams a lot of the time, um, and log jams and stuff. But we learned a really neat way to catch catfish and chase them. The first couple tournaments we fished, we our interpretation or our thought mindset of going catfishing was you went out and you anchored down and you just fanned out a bunch of poles and sat.
Hmm.
And all these tournament catfish, we were watching these boats. They would go up river and they would power that. They would they drift back down and then they'd power back up and drift back down and power up, drift back down, and we had no idea what they were doing. And again, we started asking so many questions, and the catfishing community was so nice to us to collectively take us under their wing and show us, because they're kind of wanting more and more people to join. I mean, fishing's no different than hunting and everything else. It's kind of a dying breed or a dying art. There's less and less people doing it. So they're really trying to grow the sport and everything. And so a lot of people were very kind to us, and the way we've since learned to do it, and the way that all these tournament catfishing people were doing was, we actually all have remote control trolling motors on the front of our boats, and we stand on the back and we point our boat up the river, and we use our trolling motor to cut the boat speed to half of the current speed. So if
Hmm.
it's a 3 mile an hour current, we will cut the boat to 1.5 mile an hour, but we're floating backwards, if you will. The boat's pointed upriver, but we're floating with it. And the current's actually going a little bit faster than the boat, twice as fast as the boat, if that makes sense. And we stand on the back and we're almost fishing with like a drop shot rig, like you would a bass fisherman. And we're bouncing our baits off the back of the boat, allowing it to go back further behind. And that's why the current pull is so important to get it faster than the boat. And we're actually just thumbing out the bait as it goes out. And then we're holding the rod when one hits. So you have a 50, 60, 70 pound catfish, just slam your bait while you're holding it. I mean, and of course it's free spool. So, people talk about thumb burners, man. They can take it and just strip off drag for a while until you take it and lock it down and get him going. So it's a blast. There's just nothing like the raw power of a big 60, 70 pound fish in the current like a Mississippi. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Is that type of reel, is that required for the competition, or that's just what everybody uses?
Yeah, that's what pretty much it basically what we're using is overgrown bass fishing reels pretty much, and
Hmm.
most of them have thumb bars because we're thumbing down the spool as we're kind of bouncing or bumping along the back, and then we've got really strong drags and they hold. We all use braid because braid is so sensitive. Now we'll use a mono leader for abrasion resistance, but
Hmm.
uh, we all use braid because it's you get that instantaneous feedback. You can feel a fish pick it up and pull it pick it up, move it, whatever. Whereas mono is so stretchy. A lot of the fish we catch are 300-400 pounds, 300 or 400 feet behind the boat, and so you get that much mono. There's a lot of stretch. You would never felt that fish if it was a light bite. And now sometimes
Right.
when they slam it, it wouldn't have mattered. You could have had spaghetti on there; it wouldn't have mattered. But yeah, some of the lighter bites when they just pick it up and they're in a finicky mood that day or something, you want that instantaneous feedback. Plus, it helps to fill over logs and stuff like that, so you don't get hung up as much.
Right. I've heard that's useful for surf fishing as well.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah,
Being able to, I guess, with the crashing and everything of the waves right there, being able to get some information through it.
yeah.
Um, so jumping back a little bit, when you were kind of growing up and kind of broadening what you were like deer hunting and things like that, what were those experiences like? What got you interested in that?
I would probably say that uh, I mean, I naturally had a love for the outdoors, but I would probably say that was intensified by uh, just my desire to be closer to my dad and to spend time with him. My dad worked at a factory for 37 years, and he was a pretty gruff man. I mean, he was very loving, but uh, he was very uneducated, and he didn't have a ton of communication skills. I mean, um, there was not a lot of verbal communication in our house as far as just sitting around talking about how did your day go, how are you feeling, any of that kind of a verbal communication. It was just kind of a being in close proximity was saying enough, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So just the chance to get to hang out with dad and go with him and participate in the things that he was passionate about. And my dad would have never used the word passion, but I think I had that innate understanding of the fact that he was passionate about some of these things. He was passionate. I watched him when I was a really little kid. I watched him go out with one of his friends, and he didn't have a lot of friends, but he had one from work, and they rabbit hunted together. And I watched him come home one afternoon on a Saturday afternoon, and it was freezing cold. I mean, it was probably December or January, and I watched him take his rubber boots off and pour water out of his boots that he'd been walking in all day.
Oh,
And and that kind of clicked with me. I'm like, man, if this man did that all day and put up with that and went through that kind of stuff to to do what he loved. I mean, again, words were never said. It just clicked that wow, this man's willing to endure that kind of you know whatever. It just like it again. It clicked. And so when he started taking me, it just like okay, this is a chance to get to hang out and do what he does. And so I think that was the big reason why I fell in love with it. And again, I don't know. I think even if he would have, quit, he would have never done it. But if something would have happened to him, I would have continued on. But getting to grow up with him doing that was a big part of forming my foundation of who I became and who I grew into.
right. So was it, did he get you involved with deer hunting then?
He did not. My dad he killed a deer, a little button buck when I was in junior high. He went with some of his brothers, and he had to drive 2 hours. Again, we didn't have deer around, so he went. He drove about 2 hours. He did kill a button buck one time. I remember they brought it home, and I got to help skin it. But that was the first deer I'd ever seen, and didn't. And then we never. He really didn't do much more other than that. No, I got into deer hunting when I'm the first person to ever take a college class in my family, let alone get multiple degrees and things like that. But I decided to go to college about a year after I'd been out of high school. I'd sit around and Hardee's had called twice, and I turned them down. That was literally the extent of the job offers I had out of college, or out of high school rather. And I remember I was sitting around, and Dad would come home from his factory job. He was reading the paper he'd get home at 3:30, and he'd pick up the paper and start reading it. And I remember he was over in the recliner reading his newspaper, and I still remember this day. I said, I think I'll go to college. And I remember the paper just went, he lowered the paper like, what? I'm like, yeah, I've got some friends that have done it. And I mean, if they're succeeding, if they can make it, surely I can make it. I mean, they're no smarter than I am. And I had never taken an ACT test. I'd never taken a college prep course, nothing. We had to run around and struggle to get me in. But I went to college the next year. And I remember it was tough because we had no finances for college. I mean, like I said, Dad worked at a factory, and I mean, we had no preparation, nothing. I was taking out student loans left and right, and I was struggling to put food on the table. I mean, it was tight. It was real tight. And I literally resorted to walking around, finding fence rows out in the country outside of the town where I went to college at, and was trying to kick up rabbits. And occasionally I'd kill a rabbit or a squirrel or something, and that would help a little bit. And I remember I was in the Walmart sporting goods section. It was late night. It was back when Super Center stayed open 24 hours a day. And it was probably midnight. And I was just killing time as it's probably a sophomore in college or maybe a freshman. I was somewhere through that. And I picked up the wildlife code handbook that they have on Walmart sporting goods counters. And I picked one up and took it home more or less as reading material to pass the time. And I remember getting back to my living room in my apartment, and I was thumbing through it, looking through it, and I came across white-tailed deer. I'm like, man, I kind of forgot they have deer where I went to college at. They did not have them where I grew up, but they did have them where I went to school at Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And I'm like, man, if I could kill a deer, that'd go a long way to providing a lot of meals for me. And a couple nights later, I was back in that same Walmart, and they had a used bear whitetail hunter bow hanging on the rack. And as you know, Walmart doesn't sell used bows. I mean, they don't sell used anything. But there was a used bow hanging on the rack. And I mean, to this day, I think it was a God thing because I talked to them, I asked for the manager to come out, and I said, look, this thing's got rust all over it. It's clearly used. What would you take? Because again, keep in mind, I was really poor. We didn't have a lot of money. And the guy shot me an offer. I mean, it was like a bow, a release, and because it was all packaged up there, and like six arrows, and he shot a price like $60, something like that. And I'm like, sold, I'll take it. And it didn't fit me. I had no idea how to fit a bow to me. I didn't know how to tune a bow, nothing. But I made it work, and that's how I started. Now, I did not kill a deer for the first couple of years, but that's what got me into it, and then it turned into an incredible passion of mine.
Yeah. So you're pretty confident it was used. It wasn't. You don't think maybe it was left out in the rain or something like that?
100% it was used. I mean, it had been shot. Someone had already tied a peep sight into it.
Oh, okay.
There was a knocking point on it. I mean, someone had set it up and hunted with it for a year or so and brought it back. I mean, it was 100% used.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. And some, back in that day, Walmart was notorious for taking. I mean, if you brought anything to Walmart, they'd take it back, right? And
for like a return.
Yeah. So someone had brought it back, and then they just stuck a price tag on it and hung it up on a hook, and I happened to come in and see it.
Very cool. Do you still have it?
I do. It's actually around the corner. It's on the wall with I ended up shooting a small buck with it over in Illinois, and it's a little 5-point basket rack. It's probably a year and a half old buck, but the antlers are out of there and the bow's hanging right underneath it.
Very cool. That's a good memory.
Yeah, I've actually thought about. My boys have said that I need to take it out sometime and see if I could kill a deer. Because now I've got my own YouTube channel and everything. And it would kind of be a cool video to go out and hunt with that and see. I'd have to spend a little bit of time with it. And everything, probably resight it all in. I mean, I haven't even pulled it back in 25 years or so. But it would be kind of cool to go hunt with that bow again now.
Yeah, I imagine. give it kind of a full story.
Yeah, it would be.
Have your boys ever shot it?
Not that bow. No, they have their own. We're pretty blessed now that I was able to buy them, a good starter bow to start with, and now they both have a really nice adult bow as they got older. But they never shot that one.
Yeah, So you mentioned that your boys didn't get to see the struggles of when you were learning to, I think you mentioned hunting deer.
Yep.
Is there any of those stories that you're willing to share?
As far as the struggles for me, yeah. So I guess I hunted for, I started bow hunting because that was the thing that I killed. I grew up I grew up BB gun hunting for a long time, and then I went in the military for just a little bit, and so I became a pretty good crack shot with a rifle, a BB gun, 22, anything like that. I killed one deer with a rifle, and it just didn't do anything for me. When I got into bow hunting, like I said, I that that was just something super special. And the fact that when I looked at that wildlife code handbook, deer season, gun season was like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 days long, whatever it was. And bow season ran 3 months. So I figured that was what I wanted to do because I had way much more time to do it. However, it took me about 3 years to kill my first deer with that. So that deer that's on the wall that I just alluded to earlier, I didn't kill him till, I think I was married then at that point, and so it was a struggle. And then it took a while to kill another one, and then I didn't kill my first big deer until well, it was about probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after I started bow hunting, and then it started progressing from there. But I never really, it was more luck when I got into a big buck, as opposed to now. I know what to look for. I know where they hang out. Does that mean I'm going to go kill one every time? No, absolutely not. But I can put the odds in my favor by going to the right spots. But it just took years and years and years, a lot of trials and tribulations to learn what to look for. So yeah, I don't know if there was any one specific struggle other than just a long time, just a lot of lot of trying to figure out what I was doing.
Yeah, just kind of trial and error.
Very much so, very much so. There was a lot of magazine stories I read and things like that, but that was, I figured out that a lot of the magazine writers were writing magazine. It took me a long time to figure this out. A lot of times I would go out and follow their advice and do things like, hunter rub line. Greg Miller is, has wrote a lot of books and articles about hunting rub lines. And I figured out after a while that, man, all of these guys were writing articles to get paid. They weren't necessarily just, that was what was really working. Once you kind of get into the industry a little bit, you figured out that there are people that make videos, they write articles and things, and not necessarily what's working for the average guy. It sounded good, and a magazine bought it.
It's hard to find what specifically works. I think just doing this, talking to individuals like yourself, I've probably learned more than I ever have when it comes to hunting in just the past couple of months. Because I get to talk to real people instead of just getting some quick sticky note advice, basically.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
And is your dad still with us?
He is not, unfortunately, but you know what? It was I told a really good friend of mine. So my dad was not saved. He was not a believer his whole life. He kind of grew up in a church and then he walked away. And my mother was, I kind of, it's the old thing where you say you got a drug problem, right? I was drugged to church as a toddler, as a kid, and my mother made sure I had that drug problem, being drugged to church. And but so my mother spent her whole married life praying for my dad, that he would come around. And he was just I told you, he was kind of poor, uneducated, not communicative, didn't have a lot of skill set in that area, and was very hard hearted. And almost to the point where, like, never abusive, nothing like that. But it would have been easy to call him a mean man, other than the fact that, I knew he loved me and things like that. But he didn't show a lot of love. And about, I don't know, I'm not really good with dates or things like that, but probably 7 or 8 years ago, something like that, he got he came down with throat cancer, and or and it eventually went up into his brain. But he had smoked his whole life. I mean, he was smoking a couple packs a day, and so it really it started getting to it, more and more, and it was really, I hated it because he'd never been a sick. I mean, like I could count on my hand. I don't know. I probably twice in my whole life remember him being sick more than like one day in his life and with a cold or something like that. And so fully expected that man to be around until he was 90 or so. I mean, he just was extremely healthy, hard worker, never sick. When he got cancer, it really changed his perspective. He started going to church with my mom. He gave his heart to the Lord, and probably about 3 or 4 months after that, he passed on. But I've told somebody, like, I've missed, my boys were probably, I don't know, 12 and 8, something like that when he died. And so they're 17 and 21 now, whatever, somewhere in that time frame. Again, I'm not good with dates, and my wife would just like probably laugh at me that I can't remember exactly, but I just don't place importance on things like that. But what I do place importance on is I told a good friend of mine is I I really miss the fact that he's not here with us for the next 15 or 20 years of my life, of my boy's life, getting to see my grandkids, his great kids. But I would trade it all for the fact that I know that he's in heaven waiting for us now. That
Mm-hmm.
after 35 or 40 years of being just absolutely obstinate, that he was not going to, succumb and do anything of that nature. And then for him to completely make a 180, I mean, he became very soft hearted. I mean, it was a true conversion. I mean, you could just tell 100%. He prayed a couple prayers at like over like for like to bless the food at a dinner that never would have done anything like that. And so it was really cool to see. Like I said, I miss him greatly. He was the influence in my life growing up. But I'm glad I'm willfully make that trade anytime again I would not want him with me for the next 20 years and know that he did not go to heaven. I'm glad to trade those 20 years knowing I'll see him again.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough thing. Um, but when you're someone of faith, it's an easy decision to make.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
When you think about the width of time that we're here, you know, we're here like a vapor, smoking a candle. You think of what eternity is. I mean, 20 years is nothing to have that decision and that trade off.
oh yeah, it always I guess amazes me in the aspect when thinking about the time that Jesus was here and he was what we would consider young when he passed.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and then you look at all these other, like, I guess going back to the very beginning, I think Adam was like 900 something. Moses was something like 120 or something like that. So you have these people that live very long lives, and his huge impact on this earth was but a flash in history.
Yep. Yep. 3 years, was his length of his ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Did your sons have a relationship with your father?
So my oldest was more so because he's 4 years older than my youngest. So my father got to come in. My oldest was playing a lot of city football. We homeschooled both of our boys, so they at that point they were in the area youth football league, and my dad got to come and watch him play a lot. And they had a really good. He and my oldest had a really good relationship. My youngest probably doesn't remember him as much other than through pictures and stuff. But yeah, he was pretty tight with my oldest.
Oh, okay, that's good. Um, I remember I had the interesting pleasure of having three different grandfathers because my mother was adopted. Um, but the one that raised her is the first one that passed in my life, and it was like right at the end I started having a relationship with him. And like right as things started getting good, he passed on.
Yeah.
Just seems to be how it goes, I guess.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, So when you were going into the thoughts of making a family, what was your kind of mindset for wanting to introduce your kids to the outdoors?
Yeah, obviously it was pretty important to me. I actually wrote a story for Peterson's Bow Hunting on how to cultivate a supportive wife, and it started with the story of our first date. And the second question I asked my future wife was, "Hey, hunting's pretty important to me. I'm probably going to have a lot of mounted animals around the house. Are you? If not saying it's ever going to go to a second date. I mean, literally prefaced it like that. Not saying it's going to go to a second date, but if it does, and if things worked out, because we were older in life, right? I was in grad school. We were 26 and 27, and I'm like, if it worked out, I'm like, would that ever be a problem having mounted animals in the house? And she thought for a little bit, and she goes, as long as they're not in the bathroom, bedroom, or kitchen, I'm fine with it. And I thought about it. I'm like, okay, go in order.
Mm.
And so, yeah, that's when I was like, okay, the date's going to go on. But so we knew right off the bat that, if things worked out, which it did, obviously, that, it was the outdoors was going to be a big part of our family. And obviously I was thinking about that. And we were blessed with two boys again after 5.5 years of infertility. And so, I started fishing with the boys early on. That's the easy way to introduce your kids to the outdoors. Is a little bobber and a worm or a cricket or something like that. Is just we did a lot of that, and then like I said, we started deer hunting and turkey hunting, and we did a lot of it in a blind because kids can wiggle and move, and they would take Hot Wheels toys and things like that, and they'd be playing in the dirt in a blind, and I'd tap them and say, shh, stand up, look, there's there's an animal out in front, and so we did a lot of that. And I remember early on, I get a lot of questions because my boys are extremely passionate about the outdoors, and so a lot of people, in social media, on Facebook and Instagram, and through our YouTube channel, they see how passionate both my boys are in tagging along with me, and they own it themselves now. It's not just with me. And I get a lot of questions about people asking like, how did you do it? How did you get your boys so passionate about the outdoors? I'm like, well, they cultivated that themselves, but I always made it fun for them. And I remember one time with my oldest, it was January, it was a late doe season, and I remember my oldest, we had a buddy heater out in the blind with us, and we were overlooking a cut soybean field, and it was just getting prime time. I mean, it was like, let's say it got dark at 5:30, it was like 4:45, right? You got that 45 minutes before sundown, and things are going to really start moving. And I remember my youngest, he looked up and goes, "Daddy, I'm really cold. Can we go?" And it's easy as a passionate outdoorsy dad to go, "No, suck it up. You're going to say, right?" And I thought about that, and I'm like, "Yeah, honey, we can go." Because that night wasn't as important as cultivating that love affair for the rest of his life, right?
Mm.
And I think too many dads miss that. They're like, they're going to just beat it in their son that they're going to love it, and now we've made it to this point, right? And I think a lot of people drive their kids off and away from that by doing things like that. And did I want to leave it 45 minutes before prime, and we're getting to prime time, 45 minutes before dark? I didn't want to. I'd sit there for 2 hours too, getting to that point. And, but I made the decision. And so I did a lot of things like that where I made it fun for them. But if for some reason they're like, "Dad, we've been here for a while. Can we go?" And of course, I would realize they were so young that, it didn't matter. And now my boys are the same way. I've watched my youngest son break an inch of ice wading through to cross a ditch to get to the other side that he wanted to go hunt, on his own, and things like that. I'm falling behind him. I'm like, I can't believe this is where he's going to hunt. I'm tagging along after him now. And so they're just so passionate, and they do things that like amaze me of how they go out and the last big deer that my oldest son killed, it was a sun up to sundown hunt was what he was planning. He shot a bruiser of a buck at like 12:03 p.m. right in the middle of the day. And I don't even hunt dusk to dawn myself. I pick and choose my spots. And he was like, "Dad, I'm going to go out there all day. I know November 11th is your day. You killed a bunch of bucks out there. I'm going to go sit all day." And he killed a bruiser at noon, straight up noon, pretty much. So I get to watch them do some cool things now, but I think it was because I gave them some leeway. I gave them grace early on
Yeah.
to get cold and things.
And learn to love it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the involvement with catfishing as well, was that a little easier to get them to sit through that?
So it's funny. So my oldest did not buy into the catfishing thing because it was the struggle again, right? And because we struggled for a while. And my youngest, I mean, bought into it lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, he struggled with me, and he's like, "We're going to figure this out together." And he bought into it 100%. My oldest, he's like, "Yeah, when you figure it out, come get me."
Mm.
and so we've taken him out a few times, and we still struggle quite a bit, really, to be honest with you. We're not near as good as we want to be. But it has been interesting to see that mindset of my youngest has got that mentality of, "Hey, I see you struggling, and I'm struggling too, but we're going to figure it out together, and it's gonna be more meaningful when we figure it out together."
Yeah.
And so but he's just more of a natural fisherman, where my oldest son is more of a hunter type dude. But he's more like his mama too. He loves to hang around friends. He loves that he's more gregarious. He's more social. He likes to do that stuff. Where my youngest is more like me. He's really an introvert, and if he can immerse himself in the outdoors and fishing or hunting, and he'll come up for air and see some of his friends every once in a while, and then he'll go back to hunting and fishing all the time. So that's their personalities.
Do you think they had it easy in a way, since they were able to learn from you, since you kind of passed that struggle phase?
Yeah, I think so. And again, I think both of them really benefited from the foundation I built, and the knowledge base that I built deer hunting, because I started from, no one taught me, no one trained me. I didn't have any mentor to take me under their wing for bow hunting or deer hunting and things. It was all self-taught, all learned over 3 decades. And so there was a huge knowledge base that they benefited from there. But again, it was kind of really neat to see, it was neat to see how both boys responded to watching us struggle and start from scratch in the catfishing world. One of them embraced it. My youngest embraced it. He's my boat captain. He's the one that runs the trolling motor. He's the one that reads the graph, and when we're looking for fish and marking fish on the bottom and finding new spots to fish, he's that guy. And again, my oldest is like, "Yeah, when you figure it out, come get me." So,
Do you think your oldest would still be interested in deer hunting if he had to go through that kind of struggle?
that's a great question. I don't know. Um, he's still struggling. I mean, he doesn't go out and kill deer all the time, and it's been interesting to see that he will go. I think he's got more of a love for the deer hunting of it. So even though he knows the success I've had, he's still struggled himself. And he'll go out and sit several times in a row without seeing a deer. So yeah, I think he's good on that.
When you were raising them, taking them out to introduce them to deer hunting, was there ever kind of times in either the stand or blind where you're kind of separated from where they would have access to like phones and things like that, and would be open to conversations that would be a little more intimate between father and son?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's why I'm pretty close to both my boys, and I think that's one of the big reasons why is you get out there and you can talk about so much more. Where the world just quietens down and slows down, the pace slows down, and there's not as many you know I don't know, distractions. So yeah, absolutely. Again, and sometimes I think some of it, sometimes you can have a great conversation that's very deep and meaningful, and there's other times that I think just there's an understanding between a dad and a son that when you're out there, sometimes you can have deep, meaningful conversations. There's other times that there's not a lot that needs to be said. You can just the closeness, the proximity, the relationship is there, and it speaks volumes. So I think it being outdoors with your kids lends itself to both.
Right.
Yeah.
Where would you say you seek God in the great outdoors?
So I would say, it's in everything. It's from watching the sun come up. It's watching the first tweets of the birds. For me, a big one for me is when I walk up and place my hands on a deer I just killed. Right. I mean, knowing I heard a traveling pastor came to our church one time, and I bet I was 6 or 7 years old. This is literally one of my first earliest memories, and he talked about hitting a sparrow with his car as he was driving down the highway.
Hmm.
And he said he stopped and turned around and went back and cupped the sparrow in his hands and held him because he wanted to be close to God, because he knew that God knew when every living thing died. He knew everything about everything, right? And he knew that God realized that, not saying God caused it or anything like that, but he just knew that God knew. And that pastor talked about, he held that sparrow and felt closer to God, that he was there at that moment. And I've never had that thought process, but I I certainly, when I put my hands on a deer whose life I just took, I'm very, very respectful. I mean, do I go out purposely to kill the deer? Yeah, absolutely. Do I enjoy killing the deer? Absolutely. Again, I do. At the same time, I'm very respectful that I just took a life that God created. And that's usually when, like, okay, that's the realness of the situation just sits in. I don't take it for granted. And so that's a big part of it. We're very thankful. We've been very blessed. We haven't had to buy red meat from a grocery store in 29, 30, 32 years. So, I mean, it's been almost since we've been first married, because I kill enough deer that we are able to sustain our family and support ourselves just with the deer I kill. And so we're very thankful of the whole process, even when we're eating and things like that. So is that a time when I'm closer to God because of the hunt? It's a time when I'm very appreciative, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So, so yeah, I'd say throughout the whole process. Yeah.
How many deer would you say lasts you until the following season?
We have to take, if we kill less than three, well, we can't kill less than three, and I haven't killed less than three in decades. We have to take three to barely squeak by. And there's been a few years when hunting was hard, whatever. Maybe I had to work a little bit more and didn't get as much time off. I've been very blessed with my career, the path that God's led me down. That I'm very autonomous in my job. I get to hunt way more than the average person does. And so I usually get, it's usually not due to lack of time in the woods, but maybe something, just didn't go right that year or whatever. And there was a few times when week three was the number I killed, and it was hard to make it through the year. Preferably 4 to 5 is we can eat pretty comfortably throughout the year without having to stretch and skimp and, supplement with fish and other things like that. But yeah, this year we killed 6, and we've got. I worked up 40 pounds of hamburger meat 2 weekends ago, and I bet I've still got another 150 pounds of meat that I need to turn into burger. And I'll just do it a little at a time as we need it. So yeah, 5 or 6 deer we get through pretty comfortably with a family of 4.
Yeah. Do you think the size has a big impact on that? Like you're going after a very specific deer and not just getting a random doe or something like that?
Well, I kill a lot of does, but a lot of my does are, I try not to go after yearling does. I want
Hmm.
to shoot a mature animal, because for me it's just as hard to work up a yearling deer as it is a big adult deer. The same work goes into it. You just don't get near as much meat. And so I try to target big adult does, or, again, the bucks that we're going after are usually, I mean, I usually won't even pick up my bow unless it's a 4.5-year-old buck. And you're talking a big, in the Midwest, that's a grain fed 4.5-year-old buck. It's a big, big buck. So, they provide a whole lot of meat for sure.
Yeah. Is it kind of because it is whitetail, right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Are they in that area? They're maybe a little larger in comparison to like the size of a mule deer.
I don't know. I haven't had the pleasure of hunting mule deer yet. From what I understand, a mule is actually a larger animal. whitetails, when their ranges meet at the edge of each respective range, I know a whitetail is more aggressive and a whitetail will push out a muley, but I think the muley is actually bigger in body stature and
Right.
in size. That's one of my animals. It's on the bucket list. I really want to go. I probably won't be able to do it this year, just from work and everything, but probably in the next year or two, I'm really wanting to go out west and spot and stalk some muleys out in the, South Dakota, North Dakota, places like that. But yeah, our deer are still, you got to figure most of the deer I'm hunting around here in the Midwest. I hunt a lot of ag country. They've grown up on corn and soybeans, strips of wood, in this area, so they get really, really big.
Yeah. I was curious because like the deer that I get, if I got what I would consider a good sized doe in North Carolina, it probably wouldn't last me much more than a month.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think your deer a lot smaller than ours out here in the Midwest. I remember I went down to Alabama. Oh, it's been years and years ago, but I went down with some family members and hunted around some plantations, some forestry plantations where they grow the paper mills and everything happen down there. And I had a doe came by, and I literally thought it was a German Shepherd that was walking through the woods. And I'm
Hmm.
not making that up. I thought it was a dog walking through the woods, and then finally I was like, it dawned on me, like, wow, that's a deer, because it was so much smaller than what we're used to seeing up here.
Yeah. Doesn't impact cars as much if you hit them though.
Right, right.
Do you find using going with ground helps to extend the time?
Well, as far as the ground meat, yeah, it's just more so because we use it in so many recipes. I mean, we use it in chili and stew and hamburger
Mhm.
helper and meatloaf and tacos. And I mean, you just keep going on. It's almost like the, Forrest Gump thing, or they're talking about shrimp, right? And they go on
Right.
and on and on about the recipe. I mean, that's kind of the way we do. We use it for smash burgers, hamburgers. I mean, you just keep going on. So we use it for so many things. But yeah, it probably extends it somewhat. But yeah, six or seven deer. I mean, it takes multiple freezers to accommodate that many deer.
Right.
Probably if you're from North Carolina or a southern state where your deer may, and I'm approximating, probably 40% smaller than our deer. Yeah, you may not realize how much deer that can be
Right.
especially a big 4.5-year-old buck.
Yeah, I do have two freezers for multiple animals, but one deer out here is basically one shelf. It
Mm.
doesn't go very
Oh,
far.
yeah, no, one deer here is you're filling up a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your son's relationship with God?
Yeah, both of them are saved. They've been saved from an early age, and both of them own their own relationship, right? I mean, so they grew up in a Christian household, but both of them are very very committed, and they're both striving to deepen that relationship. Both of them serve in various ministries at our church. In fact, our youngest is just getting ready to graduate high school, and he's in what's called a vocational technical program where he's studying the electrical trades. And his career goal is he's dead set on becoming a lineman. He wants to go to lineman school and become a lineman. And but he's really looking at taking a gap year between high school and going to lineman school so he can go become a counselor at a church camp that's at an area lake that comes in. And my oldest son has served at a special needs camp. He actually serves in a special needs ministry. He's not special needs, but he just feels called to assist in that program. And so both of them again have a very strong, committed relationship. They work on it, and they exhibit that and show that by serving and not just sitting like a knot on a log. They're actively involved in the church and in various ministries. So we're pretty proud of them.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And I'm sure going after being a lineman, that he recognizes the parallels of being in a tree stand as well, or
He
a
is.
saddle, I should say.
Yeah, so yeah, we're saddle hunters, obviously. So we're highly involved in that niche of the industry of being saddle hunters, and a lot of people have learned from our videos and things. And so yeah, he's looking forward to he's like, I'm already doing what it takes. I'm already doing that. I just don't make the money. So obviously there's a lot more to it than that. But yeah, he's like, yeah, that's right up my alley.
Yeah, just carry his bow when he goes up to repair something. Do some
Yeah,
suburban hunting.
yeah.
So you, if you don't mind my asking, you brought up the infertility thing a couple of times. Do you mind
Yeah.
telling that story?
No, I'd love to tell that story. It's probably one of my favorite testimonies I've got. So, like I said, my wife and I got married when we were older, and we waited for a couple years before we really started trying to have kids. Not thinking, any normal couple thinks that's just going to happen pretty easy, right? And a couple years in our marriage, we're like, it kind of hasn't happened. That's kind of weird, and we went on, and then finally we had to, we're 5.5 years into it, and we started seeing specialists and our doctors and our OBs and things like that, and come to find out they did some testing, and they basically we were told that we had a 0.001% chance of ever getting pregnant naturally. So 1,000th of 1% chance of ever getting pregnant naturally. And we tried artificial insemination. We tried different things. So we kind of looked into adoption. I mean, some people are called to adopt, and I'm glad they are. I didn't really feel led that way. I just, I had some reservations about that, and so we were at a standstill. And my wife and I had went to visit her aunt in Huntsville, Alabama, and we spent the weekend there, and we were on our way back home, and we were coming. There's you got to kind of do a weird cut through to get from there to Cape Girardeau, where we lived, and it involved stopping at Paducah, Kentucky. And we stopped there to get gas, and it was our last gas stop before we shot across this little 2-lane road to get to the major town where we lived in. And I was getting gas, and there was a Toyota Camry right behind us. There was a black gentleman with a map. This is back in the days when people still used maps, right? Before Google and MapQuest and everything else came back. And he had a map spread across kind of an atlas, road atlas, spread across the hood of his car. And he was kind of tracing lines and everything. And literally he was right behind me as I was getting gas. I turned around, I'm like, "Hey man, where are you looking at going? You need some help or directions where you're going?" He goes, "I'm trying to get to Cape Girardeau. I can't figure out how to get there." I'm like, "Dude, that's where I live." I'm like, "If you'll just, when we finish getting gas, you just literally get behind me. I'll pull you all the way there. Just stay on my bumper." And he goes, "Oh man, that'd be great," And so we continued talking, struck up a conversation. Well, it wasn't long. His wife gets out of the car, and when his wife gets out of the car, my wife had been looking in the mirrors and everything. She gets out of the car. So now there's 4 of us standing there between our 2 bumpers, my rear bumper, his front bumper, and we're just having a good conversation and just chatting and everything. They're just a nice couple, and she kind of just, in the course of conversation, she goes, "Oh, do you guys have kids yet?" And my wife just kind of, when you're that age and you haven't had kids yet and everything, you just kind of get the standard answer down. And my wife just kind of brushed it off, like, "Not yet. It's kind of God's timing. Well, whatever happens." And she kind of cocked her head funny. She caught it, and she's like, "What do you mean you haven't?" She goes, "Are you guys struggling or trying?" Or so now they get on this course of conversation, and we talked for a few minutes, and then she looked at her husband, and they just, like, their eyes are glinting, and they look at us, and she goes, "We're just coming back from a Creflo Dollar healing seminar in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where we're coming from. We live in Kansas City, Kansas, and we're just coming back from this healing seminar. We're fired up. Can we pray for you guys?" And I'm like, "We've got people all over the country praying for us. I mean, friends and relatives and everything." I'm like, "Yeah, if you guys want to pray for us, fine. I mean, no, what's one more couple praying for us?" We joined hands there, Jacob, and that woman placed her hand on my wife's womb. Again, not pregnant at the time, not even close, hadn't, nothing. And she prayed the most electric, incredible prayer I've ever heard in my life. I mean, literally, goosebumps and chills were going down our spines as she's praying. I mean, it was probably the most powerful prayer I've ever heard in my life. And so we quit. We stopped our conversation. They got in their car, and we got in our car. And I'm like, "Well, go ahead. Again, we're going to Cape Girardeau. We're going down the road. If you'll just stay behind us, we'll go." And we'd driven about 3 or 4 miles, maybe 5 miles, something like that. And my wife turned to me and she goes, "Do you think that?" And I just held up my hand, and I was like, "Don't say anything." We'd been reading the book of James and studying the power of the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Don't say anything. Just let it go. Just let it be." And so we didn't really talk that much more about it. But I didn't want either one of us to get on a negative slant of whatever, right? Just talking about how being dismissive of that event or that prayer.
Right.
And so we didn't say anything, and we just kept on going. And a month later, we found out we got pregnant that weekend. That weekend.
Oh.
So we waited. And again, it'd been 5.5 years. Our doctor told us we had 0.001% chance of getting pregnant, and that's the weekend we got pregnant. And so we waited. We were about 5 months along. My wife had just started to show a little bit, and I called the couple because we exchanged contact information. I called them, and I said, "Hey, we're going to be up in the area a little bit. We'd love to come and worship with you guys while we're in town. What church do you go to again? And we could just meet you there." And so he gave me the name of the church, and I immediately hung up and turned around and called the pastor of that church. And I explained what had happened, and I said, "Look, we would love to come give our testimony in your church about what happened with a couple of your parishioners, a couple of people that go to your church." And he kind of vetted me out. He asked me a ton of questions, rightfully so. And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Why don't you guys come on?" And it was funny. We got there. We arranged it. We talked a couple more times with that couple. We arranged to meet them at the front door or whatever. And we went in, and it was funny because it was a 98% black church in Kansas City. I mean, and it was probably had 800 to 1,000 people there. And we walk in, and we're sitting beside them, and their pastor was up early in the sermon. I don't even know if we got to the worship music or what yet, but he's kind of doing the welcoming announcements. And he goes, "Hey, and just to let you guys know, we've got a couple special guests here. They're all the way from the other side of the state of Missouri. And hey, Greg and I also want you guys to come on up." And the couple we were sitting beside, they're like, they literally turned like, "Why is our pastor inviting you?" Because we hadn't said a word to them. We hadn't told them anything.
Okay.
And so we go up to the pulpit area, and we kind of tell the same story I just told you. And I said, and what this couple doesn't know is that we're 5 months pregnant now. And I mean, the church just exploded. I mean, it just like they jumped up, and I mean, it was so awesome. So yeah, it was pretty cool. So we got to give our testimony there, and then we had Matthew, my 21-year-old now. And then we had a couple miscarriages, and then we had Gabriel, our 17-year-old. So Matthew is our 21-year-old. Gabriel is our 17-year-old. And but yeah, pretty cool event.
Yeah. So it did that kind of just kick things off, and from what you just said, it sounded like it took a few more years, but did it kind of break the cycle, and you guys were able to get
I think so. So because it was a couple of years after that we got pregnant and lost that one. Year two after that we got pregnant, lost that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Gabriel, and so they're 4 years apart. And so we were a little worried about that as far as being that far apart, how their relationship would be. What would it be like having two boys that were 4 years apart? And I mean, they're boys, they've had their fights and things, but nothing. I mean, for the most part, they're best friends. I think there was enough separation there that, they never really competed too much. I'm sure there was times when my oldest was a brat to, there was times when like he was constantly, the little one couldn't walk past the big one without him hitting him or something. I'm like, "Matthew, would you let him walk by without hitting him?" Something like that. But for the most part, there never was that competition to see who was the best or who was the biggest or who was the baddest or whatever, because there was enough of an age gap that they really got along really well, and they're really, really good friends today.
Yeah. My oldest is 6 and my youngest is 1. Those are my two boys, and then I have a daughter in the middle. And the boys get along pretty good. It's my daughter that abuses my youngest.
Yeah.
But I guess roughly similar age gap. So I'm curious to see what they're, especially when it comes to like doing outdoor hobbies and activities and the hunting lifestyle. My wife we were describing to my oldest what the word hobby meant. And I said, it's when you spend money on things that don't matter. And she starts listing things off and she says hunting. And I'm like, hold on, that's a lifestyle.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've
Um,
been very fortunate with, I've been fortunate enough to write, do a lot of writing for my outdoor magazines and things like that. And then with my YouTube channel and I've been very fortunate that my passion, my hobby has been paid for the bulk of our life. So mostly through magazine articles and things like that. But yeah, that's helped my wife, look past my
yeah,
obsession with it.
that's a big part. So part of my story of why I got the podcast started, there's people that kind of suggested it and then pushed me into it more further when I presented the idea. And it was one of those things that I just felt like it was something God was calling me to do, which is why I decided to go as much as I could the faith direction with it.
Yep.
Um, but having the idea that it could turn into something to help be self-sustaining for my hunting passions and fishing passions.
Right.
Um, I've even looked into to seeing where I could do some writing for, um, which I haven't figured that part out yet, but I've been working on my own blog for the website that goes with this podcast. So I'm hoping that'll turn into something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even if it takes a while to turn into, at least you've got, the tax write-offs and everything there,
Hmm.
because you're coupling it with a fishing trip or the get together. Well, now all of a sudden it's a business expense. And so, you can't do that forever, but initially you can. So it opens some doors that way.
Yeah. That's that I mentioned to you in the chat that I used to work in film, and that was a big part of what I did for that as well. Where you just go to lunch with someone that happens to be in the industry, and it's easy to write that off. Um, but then I sort of had to
Yeah.
making money with film is very difficult, so I had to start showing something in order so
Yep. Yep.
the government doesn't come after me for those, which I did eventually by
Right.
getting some. I ended up switching to documentary filmmaking, which ended up being kind of a natural transition to this kind of format because I get to interview people. Um, if it's not prying too much, how far along were uh, the pregnancies that you lost?
Yeah, we were probably, I don't know, between 4 and 6 months. I mean, they weren't super long. They were probably midterm there.
Okay.
So enough that you're starting to really kind of embrace the idea of having, being pregnant, having another child, and you're looking, you're far enough down the road. You're like, this is going to happen. Um, but, but yeah, I'll probably maybe 6 months, not too, probably between 2 and 4, I would say, somewhere through there. I mean, they were, and my wife would know the exact, again,
Sure.
I'm not huge on years and months and stuff like that. Like I could barely remember how old I am, but yeah, they were somewhere through there, and yeah, but not enough that you know, um, super threat to the health kind of a thing. Where like you're, having a full term baby. We've had several friends that have been in that situation, and man, I feel for them so much. But yeah, it's still far enough along that we're, you're like, okay, this is going to happen, and then it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that the emotional toll is probably the hardest part, especially for your wife.
Way more so, and I'm not saying I'm callous or hopefully not, but way more so for my wife. It's more that empathy for her, seeing how hard it was for her, because it's just, I think it's way different for a woman, when they're pregnant and than it is. I'm sure there's some guys that take it just as hard, but for me, it was the pain, the emotional pain of seeing her go through it was harder on me.
Yeah. I had a couple of scares myself. I wasn't told they're blue when they first come out. So when my first was
Mm,
born, my immediate thought was like I just had this look of horror in my
yep,
face, and my wife's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And then it started crying, and I
got it.
just all the blood came rushing back. And
Yep,
then with our other boy, more recently, there was uh, I won't go into too much detail for my wife's sake, but there was some concerns, and I actually had the thought that we might have lost him. So I at this point I kind of joke and I'm like, when they're older, it's going to be interesting to tell both my boys that I thought they were dead before they were born.
Well, I can really relate there because our first one we had to do an unscheduled emergency C-section, and I remember that so clearly because I was in the room with my wife, and I don't know if they probably changed the medical techniques and everything now so much, but 21 years ago they had a thing that looked like a little miniature corkscrew,
Uh-huh.
and what they did is they insert it through the birth canal and screw that into the top of his head, and that monitors the baby's heart rate, or at least it was something like that. And so I'm sitting there watching the baby's heart rate on the monitor. I'm holding my wife's hand. We're getting close to the point of, I mean, like due date and everything. So we're there. And I remember watching the baby's heart rate like 158, 158, 157, 154, 143, 137, 120, 90, 10, 80. I mean, it was like, I mean, it had just plummeted. And and this is all in a matter of minutes. We go from 158, which is steady what a baby should be in the womb, and all of a sudden we're at like a heart rate of 40, and buzzers go off, door bursts open, 4 nurses come in all at once. I mean, like it went from a peaceful late night. I'm just sitting there with my wife. We're watching all of a sudden it was a hustle bustle of activity. I mean, nurses are everywhere. Everybody's coming in. All of a sudden, you know, they're calling our OB. He makes an emergency run up there, and my wife is like freaking out. She's like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I'm like, "It's okay, honey." And I'm freaking out, you know, and because I mean, we're like literally a day or so away from supposed to be delivering, you know, and our OB shows up, and he's like, "Yeah, we need the baby is crowning and wanting to come out, but you're too small for him." My wife's only 5'1.5", and it's like he's not fitting, and my wife was like, I really want to give, you know, she's like, we need to go ahead and mercy C-section. We need to go, and my wife she was adamant, she was arguing. She's like, I want to have this, you know, don't cheat. We waited 5.5 years to get pregnant. Don't cheat me out of this experience of being able to deliver naturally, you know, not naturally. I mean, she would have done an epidural, but natural childbirth for the most part. And he was like, you can either deliver a dead baby or I can take him alive. Your choice. And she's like, okay, you can take him. And so we literally wheeled across the room, and I mean, literally like 20 minutes later, I was holding a screaming baby in my head. So that was number one. That was the first time. And then for Gabriel, our second boy, it was a very similar situation to what you described. When they pulled, he had to be, I think he had to be a scheduled C-section because once they do one, they pretty much like from then on, you're going to do C.
Yeah, all 3 of ours were like that.
Yep, they're afraid that the abdominal wall is going to blow up during, you know, everything. So anyway, the second was the scheduled C-section. So everything was planned, and we're there, and I remember when they went in, they had a little curtain above my wife. She's wide awake. It was the wildest thing. I don't know if anybody is listening, if you've ever been a part of a C-section or watched it happen as a dad there. But they had literally had a curtain right over my wife's chest, and she is literally fine looking up, talking to me. I mean, she is 100% to herself. And from the back of the curtain back, they've got her split open and literally pull her guts and stomach and everything and lay them off to the side so they can get to the baby. I'm like, they literally just pulled her stomach and intestines out and laid them off to the side. It was the craziest thing. Got the baby out, but when they got the baby out, cut the umbilical cord, he was completely lifeless, like completely 100% lifeless. So I'm sitting there, and like they're holding him in like 2 hands like this, and literally his head and his legs are just, I mean, like he looked 100% dead. And I'm like, and my wife's like, she smiled, but she can't see anything. And she's smiling, and she's like, hey, is everything going okay? And I'm freaking out because this baby's laying there just limp as a wet noodle sack. And I'm looking at them. No one's saying a word. And I'm like, yeah, honey, things are fine. And I'm trying to, and I watch it, and I go over and they plop him on his table. And when I say plop, I mean plop. And I'm looking over, and no one's freaking out, but no one's saying anything. And I'm like, and what I didn't realize was he had developed, my wife had gestational diabetes that formed during the pregnancy. That's the only time she ever had diabetes. The gestational period. So the baby had got hooked on a sugar supply. when they cut the umbilical cord, and he was perfectly fine until they cut the umbilical cord. When they cut the umbilical cord, it cut him off from his sugar supply. And they had to immediately give him some kind of a little thing. And there's probably medical professionals out there listening to this that know exactly what it is. They basically pumped him up with some kind of, and he immediately started. It took about 45 seconds, maybe a minute and a half. I don't know, but it was the longest 45 seconds to a minute and a half of my life, waiting for that baby to do anything, to show any signs of life. I was freaking out, and they basically gave him some kind of a little, formula that was pumped up with sugar and stuff, and he snapped back. And he never has had any kind of problems or anything like that. And my wife's diabetes, they were just gestational diabetes. She's never had a problem with anything else again. But that you talk about, I know exactly what you're talking about, being scared when you come out and you see it and like, it looks dead. So
right.
Yeah.
Not really sure how to explain what's going on. Yep.
Yeah.
They had
and the nurses finally did after a while, but it took because they had a job to do.
Yeah.
And they weren't worried about making me feel better. They just had a job to do. And I wish one of them would make me feel a little bit better, but it didn't take a long time. And then someone kind of explained, said, oh yeah, he was kind of hooked on mama's sugar supply, and we had to pump him back up a little bit. I'm like, okay. And it didn't take long.
My oldest, he was of the larger side. So they had to do something like that with like a sugary formula of something like that. My wife's probably going to listen to this one later and be like, it was this, you should know.
Exactly.
But
my wife's going to kill me for all the dates that I got wrong, but
right. But so they ended up giving him a bottle early, which actually messed with some stuff. He struggled to get into breastfeeding because of it, like because he had a bottle instantly. But there's a picture I have, the first picture I took of him, he's being sat up by the nurse and the other hand's holding the bottle, but you can't see her backhand very well. So my whole family in the lobby, when I sent them the pictures, like, he's sitting up already, just because that's how it looked.
It's funny.
So going into your youngest, having lost some pregnancies before that, what was that situation like? And I'm assuming some prayer got involved.
Oh, tons and tons. Yeah. I mean, both of them in our minds are miracle babies, right? 100% both of them are. But yeah, he kind of, I don't know. I guess people have a term for it, the rainbow baby or whatever, that, after you've lost one, but he definitely helped ease some of the pain of the first two. And then we just kind of felt more like our family was complete. We've been trying to have more, and that kind of felt like that brought it full circle. That, yeah. So, we definitely had the feeling that, it just kind of completed what we were trying to do.
Right. What was there like? Obviously, you got past a threshold from the ones you've lost. When during the pregnancy process, was there ever a point of a relief, or were you guys concerned all the way up until birth?
I'd say the first few months we were concerned because, now that's the third time you're the third time with the third kid at the same spot, right? Because we got to a couple 2 or 3 months with the second one, and 2 or 3 months with the third one. Now you're at 2 or 3 months with the fourth one. And yeah, there was some concern, but things just kept rocking and rolling and going well. And every checkup remained good. And, the longer it went, the better you're feeling about it. And there was never a hiccup with him at all, ever. So that, not saying that we didn't spend a ton of time, praying and hoping and worrying and everything that goes into that after you lost one, then you lost two, now this is the third. There's always that trepidation and fear and concern and worry, but everything went well up until the point, like I said, that, I watched them pull him out, and I'm like, because he had just had a strong heartbeat the whole way. all of a sudden they clip the umbilical cord and he just goes limp. I'm like, wow, So I was pretty scared there, really scared.
Yeah, I can understand that. What is their uh, reactions or the thoughts on their own stories? Did they care?
Oh yeah, I mean they've heard them over and over. I mean it's as a family, it's some of our strongest testimony. So they've heard the stories over and over. Yeah, I mean I don't think I don't know if they went around telling as many people that we have, because that's not their testimony, it's our
Mm-hmm.
testimony. So they've got their own testimonies for other things, but through their own lives. But yeah, they're obviously very very aware of what it took to get them here for sure.
Yeah. Well, what is their or even yourself plans for the future? Any bucket list hunts or fishing trips you guys want to take?
Yeah, so yeah, I just completed my life bucket list, which for me, if you go back on my Facebook page, just 3 or 4 posts ago, I talked about my quest for 6 for 900. So I killed 6 public land, archery only, do it yourself, no baiting, no trail cameras, all public land, all local, 6 bucks at total 900 inches. So of antlers. So that was kind of my life quest, and from here on out, I'm really kind of wanting to do some different things in the whitetail world. I want to kind of get into some suburban hunting like Seek One does, right? Our town has opened up urban archery hunting. I want to try some of that. I've never hunted permission farms really. I want to go ask some permission farm, knock on some doors, and do that because I've only hunted. It's all been DIY public land. That was just kind of a big goal of mine. It was that life bucket list. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to do some things like that. Really kind of branch out in the whitetail world and do some again permission, knock on doors, uh, suburban archery hunts. I want to do that's in the whitetail world, and then eventually, I would love to go bear hunting. I want to go cougar hunting, and I want to go mount mule deer hunting. We talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So that in the archery world, that's pretty much it. And we do a lot of turkey hunting too, and we travel a lot for turkey hunting, and we usually try to hit 5, 6, 7 states a year turkey hunting: Nebraska, Kansas, Illinois. I'll hunt Arkansas this year, so we do a lot of traveling for that. But yeah, those are the big goals for archery is just doing different things than I've always done before.
Right. Is the cougar hunt archery?
Yeah. Oh, every big game animal hunt I do will be archery. I just don't get a whole lot of enjoyment out of, not saying I'm not a big believer. I mean, I carry just about everywhere I go. I'm a big believer in Second Amendment rights. I'm a member of our church's security team. So I'm 100% an endorser of rifles and guns and the ability to carry, but when it comes to hunting, I prefer to hunt with a bow.
Yeah. Where do you go to hunt cougars with a bow?
Well, that's a hunt. Again, it's a bucket list hunt, so I haven't done it yet. But I will probably be looking at something place, like somewhere out west, Montana, Idaho, something like that.
Yeah.
I've got a good friend of mine that his dad has killed a couple. I've got another buddy who went on an incredible hound hunt, and they were riding horses and chasing after a pack of dogs, and then they would ride the horse as close as they could and tether up the horses and go the rest of the way with a bow, and he's killed a couple really nice cougars that way. So I'll look into that, and but yeah, I would love to have a big mountain lion mounted here, hanging over a mantle or something like that would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be fun. What about your boys? Do they have any goals like that?
You know, I don't. My youngest. So again, he went on a big mission trip last year to Banff, Canada, and they were helping out a lot of the local people there in Canada and everything. And this is his senior year of high school, and I told him for his senior trip I was going to take him down to right below New Orleans, a place called Venice, Louisiana. The catfishing is just incredible down there. I mean, like world class. You can't believe. Like I've got friends who go down there and say their arms get tired of reeling in the big catfish. Literally, 2 or 3 hours after they started fishing, they're exhausted from catching too many fish. And I told him I wanted to take him down there for a senior trip and go catfishing down there. And he came back from that mission trip in Banff, Canada. He goes, Dad, if it's okay, he goes, I really want to change our senior trip. He goes, I want to go elk hunting. And he's tagged along a couple of times elk hunting with me, but he was so little and he wants this to be his elk trip. And so that's our goal. We actually put in about a month ago, and I'm pointing to a monitor over here because I've got wraparound computers and monitors right here for my workstation for work and video editing for my YouTube. But we actually put in for Wyoming that's where he wants to go is Wyoming for elk trip. So we put in for his first point for Wyoming, and there's I think right now from the odds that we can tell, there's about a 10% chance he could get drawn for next year. So we'll see. The good thing about it is it's a youth trip. It's a youth tag because he's 17 and he still qualifies for a youth tag. So it's about $300, $400 cheaper than it would be next year.
Yeah.
So I hope he does draw this year. That'd be a good thing.
Yeah. There's the one that I really want to do. I'm originally from California and I now lost the local opportunity since I moved out of state. Yeah. But I really want to hunt toll elk.
Oh yeah.
But especially with being out of state, it's going to be very expensive.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm big on huge antler size, so the Rocky Mountain species is what I'm excited about. So I've watched a lot of Roosevelts and the toll or tool or however you say it. Seems like they've got a lot larger bodies, but they don't have the corresponding antler size. It seems like.
Yeah.
At least the Roosevelts don't.
It fit in my office better. I could say that. So I noticed your shirt says Staggs. Is that for your YouTube channel?
So that's the whole logo. So that's my official logo.
Yeah.
So yeah, Staggs in the wild. So I'm not super creative. All growing up all the time with the last name Staggs, I kept trying to think of how does that relate to stags to deer. I could not think of any really good channel name for our YouTube channel. But we spend so much time out in the woods, out in the wild, and I don't know, just Staggs in the wild. I had to come up with something to start making videos, and that's what we landed on. So it works. If you watched any of our videos, the intro is a red stag roaring, and so yeah, that's the channel name.
Very cool. So what's the social media channels that people can find you on?
Yeah, so on YouTube, you can either type in my name, we'll pull it up, Greg Staggs, or Staggs in the Wild. And then on Facebook, I'm Greg Staggs. You'll see the saddle hunter swinging from a tree. That's me. And then on Instagram, I'm Bow Hunter, BOHNTR. Or you type in Greg Staggs, I think we'll find me too. So yeah, all those will pretty easily direct people to me.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions I had. Is there anything else that we didn't get to talk about?
No, I think that covers it, man. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Good. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in on greatoutdoorspodcast.com. And if you happen to be listening or watching on one of our social media platforms, you should check out greatoutdoorspodcast.com for some cool merch like this hat or this awesome coffee cup for camping. And this awesome sweater as well, which features our classic Genesis 27.3. Take your quiver and your bow and go hunt me some venison. Your wife's gonna love the way you look in this. Right, honey?
Mm-hmm.
greatoutdoorspodcast.com.
Why?